Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coaches on the Couch. In today's episode, you're going to hear about storytelling and belonging and their importance as skills to leadership. We're in conversation with Pauline Blanchet, who is an award-winning filmmaker and also producer of Coaches on the Couch. Before we get into that conversation, here's just a quick introduction to the podcast, which is hosted by me, Rachel Birchmore, and fellow coach Louise Rogers. And we explore leadership in the built environment, which is also where we do the majority of our work. We're both exec coaches, and we come together to design and deliver leadership development programs for architects, engineers, and others across the built environment. For more on that, see stepuplondon.com or drop me a line at rachel@stepuplondon.com. Right, let's get into the conversation with Pauline right now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Coaches on the Couch. I'm Louise.
And I'm Rachel.
And we've been waiting for this one. And today we're turning the camera or virtual microphone around, so to speak. And we're joined by Pauline Blanchet, who's the founder of Aral Sea Productions, who, among other things, which we'll come on to, is the producer of Coaches on the Couch and has been since the very beginning.
Yeah, 6 years ago.
6 years ago. So hi, Pauline, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, as Rachel said before we started recording, we have a feeling it might be an overexcited podcast, but we'll go with it. So we get to hear your couch story after all these years. Please tell us something brief and interesting about your couch.
Well, I have to say you're very lucky to have had so many interesting couch stories, and mine isn't so interesting. It's a couch which my partner bought before I moved into the apartment, and we both hate it a lot. It's really been one of those things we've been trying to change for a long time, but we ended up deciding that we had to use it. More recently, we've started to kind of incorporate it more into our daily lives, and it has become the place we now have our TV dinners. But we do have two high stools around this kind of bar table, and that's kind of where we spend most of our time. But it will be replaced soon.
And is this in Paris, where you spend half your time, or in London?
This is in Skopje in Macedonia, where I spend the other half of my time.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't realize that. So when you edit our podcast, you're either in Paris or Macedonia.
Exactly.
Well, you learn something new every day. Okay. So, Pauline, we know you as the editor of our little podcast, but you're an award-winning documentary filmmaker, producer, and researcher. You're the founder of Aral Sea Productions, where you've created work exploring, or where you create work exploring identity, nationalism, and belonging. We saw your recent feature project, Big in Gaza Baba, mentioned on LinkedIn, and it looks brilliant and has won major international awards. So you better tell us a little bit more about that film, because you're clearly a very busy lady.
Yeah, a good place to start would be to kind of introduce my film work within the context of my research. I've been studying urban history and culture for several years, which is now my PhD. And I started working on Big in Gazi Baba when I moved to Skopje. And it's a coming of age story over the course of 3 years that follows this young Albanian girl who is the only girl in her wrestling club. And the film follows her as she tries to find belonging, both within the club, but also as a minority in the country. And the film follows her to see whether she will become a champion, whether she'll find her place within the country, but also within all other aspects of her life. But it's really kind of this intimate, very kind of soft story about a young girl going through those like crucial years of puberty. And we're nearly
Did you film it
finished.
over 3? Sorry.
Yeah, over 3 years we filmed.
You filmed it over 3 years. Wow.
Yes.
Lovely.
And I think one project which I'm starting now, which I think is more to do with the kind of built environment, is called What You Remember, which is a project which looks at this huge architectural plan makeover that happened in Skopje in Macedonia over 10 years ago by this leader who basically wanted to recreate a Macedonian identity. And the city used to be this very kind of renowned, famous, brutalist city. And it was all kind of designed by this architect, Kenzo Tange from Japan. But when the country became independent from Yugoslavia, there was really like a need to create their own sense of who Macedonians were and what the identity should be. So this leader decided to create a neoclassical type architecture, which was highly criticized because it kind of linked it to this fake history, which didn't exist. And it also, in a way, shut out some of the other histories that existed within the city, such as the Ottoman history and the brutalist socialist history. And today, people go to Skopje as a way to kind of see this crazy plan. Some people call it a Disneyland and, capital of kitsch and so on. And people kind of take it as a joke because it is ridiculous, but it's also very dangerous for how people grow up in the city because they see it as something which isn't actually real. And of course, it was a way to embezzle also a lot of money at the same time. And what's interesting is that these new buildings are actually just facades. They're not even new construction. Some of them have just been kind of plastered on with styrofoam to the old brutalist buildings.
Wow.
Yeah,
I think our audience would be really interested.
I was going to say that.
So this one will be finished probably, it will take another couple of years.
Right.
But I did make a short film that we can access on Vimeo, which kind of looks at a little bit of this. And there's been a ton of architects who have written about this as well. So there's already quite a lot online.
Yeah.
Really, fascinating. Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's so nice to pick, because we obviously know you, as Louise said, through the podcast. So it's so nice to hear about your wider work, which sounds so interesting. Anyway, so as you mentioned, you're also completing a PhD on urban belonging in Macedonia, and you're also a Cumberland Lodge Fellow. And alongside filmmaking, you've produced multiple podcasts and served as a senior producer at World Radio Paris. So tell us a bit about Cumberland Lodge.
Yeah, so Cumberland Lodge is a organization which is based in Windsor Park, and every year they take in a dozen fellows to have a kind of 2-year program where you have residencies over the course of those 2 years for several days in the framework of under different kind of subjects. Everything is kind of surrounded around the idea of democracy. So how to uphold democracy. And all the fellows are coming from completely different fields. So this year we have data analysts, economists, NGO workers, museum curators. And it's to kind of bring this discussion about how do we kind of uphold democracy, especially today, as we kind of see, especially in Europe and in the US, this kind of rise of what some would even say fascism. Using the different kind of perspectives and fields that we have, we try and come together and then take those skills back into our own fields as a way to kind of work on our leadership skills. So taking what we learn from each other to then come back to where we usually work and implement those new ideas, basically.
Wow.
And how long does that cohort run for? Is it sort of 2 years?
2 years, yeah. And then they have a really strong kind of alumni network. So you kind of get to see each other again over the course of the decades. I've met already alumni from 10, 15 years ago.
This is one of those conversations where we could go much deeper on any of these little aspects as we go along, but we share particularly interests around belonging, leadership and storytelling in slightly different guises. So we're really looking forward to hearing more of your thoughts on those. I suppose when we were thinking about this podcast, we thought it would be really interesting to take a step back from the built environment in the way that we see it from day to day, and just talk about leadership in the built environment through your lens, as somebody who has an interest in a different aspect of built environment, but also obviously has been producing the podcast for 6 years and has heard all of those conversations. Yeah, I mean, so Pauline, maybe we could start a little bit about how you've developed your interest in urban belonging, sort of where that interest came from.
Yes, so my interest in urban belonging, I think, started from simply the fact of growing up in London, growing up in Camden Town at the time when it was still when Amy Winehouse lived there, and it was still kind of like quite punk, and there hadn't been like the fire that kind of took down Camden Market, and it wasn't regenerated at all. And yeah, I even had friends from school whose parents didn't let them come to Camden because it was too dangerous or something. And I just remember seeing Camden change so much so quickly. And it really made me think about how do we create belonging in a space that's ever changing? And this happens not just in Camden. I mean, I lived also with my dad, who was in Finsbury Park, which took a bit longer to kind of, let's say, regenerate, but happened maybe in the last 5 years. And seeing basically loads of communities being priced out of those neighborhoods, seeing how the basically gentrification, so how different people were then occupying these different spaces, and how to kind of create spaces that were still able to be available for everyone. And as I started going to school and university in London, this was just something that was always present and something I was always interested in. And when I moved to Paris, I started to work a lot on the impact of the Olympic Games, the 2024 Games, and this was my master's thesis. And I was being quite critical of how that was being implemented in the northern neighborhoods of Paris that are mostly social housing. And I was, yeah, interested in seeing how, for example, some of the local sports clubs were kind of completely excluded from what was happening on their doorstep. One of the swimming pools that were being put in place was completely private, for example, in a neighborhood which has the lowest amount of children who can swim in France. And there was nothing, for example, to kind of help those children. So I guess on the kind of these kind of ideas of mega projects, I've always been interested in how these mega projects impact local communities and usually most marginalized communities. And then when I moved to Skopje and encountered this huge project, this what's called Skopje 2014, this neoclassical project, I thought it was also really interesting to kind of do something similar and look at how the minority group of Albanians living in Skopje were interacting with that. And I think having and you can take this, I think, in any field or any subject when you look at the other perspective. So something, having a bottom-up approach to a way of looking at things is really important. And I think that's something that's always been present in my work and probably something that you need also as a leader to be able
it's
to
kind of
understand.
empathy, having that empathetic and curiosity to understand
Exactly
different people's perspectives and experiences. And I mean, 2024 isn't that long ago, Pauline, is it? I had to do the math, but you have been a very busy lady, and you've actually, I mean, the achievements that you've made in the last, since graduating from your master's, are really quite considerable, aren't they? Well, I mean, I wonder what it's an odd question, but I wonder what you put that down to.
Well, thank you, firstly. That's nice. Look, I'm a bit of a nerd, I guess. I really love studying. I really like the structure of school and academia, and I know it's not for everyone. I'm very lucky that I enjoy it and I excel within that framework. And I think it's also been a driving factor for all my creative work. So I think without the research that I do, I would find it very difficult to then to to talk about other subjects using film or audio. I really need that basis and foundation of the research first.
Right.
So I guess it just really drives me. And I've been lucky as well to be in great institutions with great supervisors that motivate me, and that push me, yeah, to keep going, basically.
And where do you get your funding from for the filmmaking? And do you have to apply separately for all? So you have to be very motivated and
Yeah.
convincing and committed to, because I can imagine that that's quite a rigmarole to go through all those funding applications, work out who to apply to, what for, blah, blah.
Oh, it's a nightmare. It is. It's most of my work is just funding applications.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to get funding, especially today is harder than 5 years ago, with a
Yeah.
lot of cultural funds being cut for other aspects, obviously, because of everything that's going on. But yeah, that's most of my work is funding applications.
So I'm thinking about the connection between storytelling and belonging and leadership. And obviously, certainly we've seen in our work, and I'm sure you see in yours, the shift, there's been a huge shift in leadership and what's important to leadership. And these two things really seem to have come to the fore. Certainly, we talk very much about belonging within a Step Up leadership program. I just wonder what you thought about that shift.
I think people are constantly now reevaluating the way that they want to feel part of something
Yeah.
and thinking about whether it's worth it. I think we live in a world with so many possibilities where we're being constantly told online as well, especially I know in my generation, there's like lots of trends about, quitting your job and doing your own thing, and this kind of also sometimes very toxic hustle kind of culture.
Mm.
But I think with that is actually just comes from something very natural, is about why should I be working for someone else? What do I get out of this apart from just the salary, for example? Is this meaningful for me? And to be able to have a team or have people that work with you and colleagues that are motivated, you need to give everybody this sense of a motivation, but to have that motivation to feel like they belong in a way that's more than just a contract. I think you need to have a sense of feeling that you're needed for a
Mm.
specific reason, and that I think is a big part of the belonging. But then also having relatability within your team to feel
Mm.
like you have things in common beyond just the tasks that you have to do. And I think this comes up a lot on the pod. And I remember that there was definitely some episodes which spoke about people's experiences coming into a company, for example, and finding it hard to go in because maybe, coming from a different class, for example, and not being able to join on the ski holidays. Or, I remember a couple of examples like this, which
Mm.
actually really touched me because I think that's something that, many people experience. But to be able to do that is to be able to create much more diverse teams,
Yeah.
because not everyone is going to be able to relate with the same things. But if you have at least pockets of people who can then relate to each other, then at least they have belonging in a smaller way within that team. And I think, you can see now with people joke about Gen Z and the way they're rethinking about work and, being lazy and so on. But actually, I think they're coming from a place of a really difficult economic situation.
Mm.
And so with that comes the idea of, okay, if I'm not going to be able to buy my own house and have security, I might as well do something that I really love rather
Mm.
than just work for someone else. So then how do you motivate them to be part of that? It's really difficult because there's also a kind of you know, company hierarchy also trend going on. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Lots
difficult.
of lots of need to kind of be agile and think about people's motivation, both extrinsic and intrinsic. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
wonder when you listen to our podcasts, because you're always the first person to listen to any of them, do they feed off each other at all? Does what we talk about, or the people that we talk to, more importantly, does that, when you're thinking about your work in Macedonia, is there any link for you between those things? Because we talk to built environment specialists and you're looking at a built environment sort of phenomenon.
Definitely. I think more in the sense of thinking about, I mean, because you get to hear sometimes almost people's life stories in through their career, but you do get this idea of these kind of steps that they've taken. And for me, and I think something that I've also seen in my work is the ability to quit. I think that's been to say,
Right.
actually, no, this is, or maybe I have done this for decades now, and it's been great, and I feel I've like accomplished something, and now I need to do something slightly different or do
Mm.
something uh or what I also love the most is feeling, or when there's been some episodes where it's like feeling like they've done already such a great job as a leader. This is not what they say, but what I get from it, that they
Mm.
feel like they can pass that down
Mm.
completely in a way that's completely productive and in a way that allows them the next people to come on, which I think should be a natural step. But to be able to do that, you think you need incredible skills to do that. Or people taking a sabbatical, for example, and being able to say, I need to stop for this time because I want to do X, Y, Z, and being okay with that.
Yeah, the letting go, the ability to kind of let go, and
Exactly.
I'm liking the word yield at the moment, but kind of yield to something else that you need to do instead. Yeah.
Exactly. And to be able to transform through that. And I think in film or even in more my field, I think it's the same in the way that I think people can be very stuck in what they've been doing. And people forget that it's completely okay and actually very mature and very healthy thing to do, to say, okay, I'm going to stop for a little bit, or I'm going to focus on this now, and trusting your colleagues with what you've built. That's probably one of the most difficult things that you could do. But yeah.
I think it's something that's changed, hasn't it? So certainly since I started my career, you were thought 30 years ago, it was thought that you'd start on one thing and you'd just carry on doing that forever.
Right.
Now, I haven't done that, and nor has Louise, but at the time it was very head down, off we go, we're going in this direction, we're going to make it to the top of that tree, and that's where we're going. Whereas now I think people are much more, well, firstly, that sense isn't there from a company point of view, but I think individuals are also more, actually, I'm doing this for the time that I'll enjoy it, and I know I'm taking something from it, but actually then people anticipate they will do something else, whereas I don't think we sort of did that, or certainly I didn't think that when I was starting out on my career, which is very different to what I'm doing now. But
yeah. Is there anything that surprised you from the podcast that you've listened to, our podcast that you've listened to?
I think it's mostly always been surprised about how vulnerable people have been, about maybe even the mistakes they've done, or maybe about the naivety they maybe had when they were younger. I think we also are in a time now when we're changing kind of how we talk talk and listen to others. And I think many of the people on the podcast were able to kind of talk about bringing in new perspectives. I think this was like also a common thread throughout, which I think is spoken about in many fields. But being able to be vulnerable and to say, okay, actually more recently we've been able to, really think about that diversity in a way that maybe wasn't done before, I think was interesting. And yeah, again, something that can be seen in many places. Yeah, and I think it's probably a challenge that many still face. And I mean, this listening aspect is also something you see in terms of the multi-generational gap sometimes.
yeah.
I think it's probably one of the most difficult, but that's also been a great topic, I think. So yeah, but I think overall, I think it's the vulnerability, and it's been really great because I almost feel like sometimes it is just like sometimes, of course, it's more like project specific, but also sometimes hearing these kind of like mini biographies as they speak and they answer is really fascinating. And also how there's seeing some people also so quickly go into their careers by just, for example, doing their placement and then suddenly getting a job from that, and then suddenly from there is also so uplifting, I think, is one of the great things about the podcast.
Is there anything you think we should be covering, Pauline? Things
nice question.
we've missed completely?
I don't think so. I probably would have told you before. No, I don't think. I think you have such a great way of being able to have people open up quite quickly, actually, because I realize how quickly these episodes go now when you're actually talking. But I think you have such a great way of keeping it also topical. You cover so many subjects. I mean, especially because whether it's kind of people wanting to work more on sustainability, for example, which is something that's very topical. And also people are also quite happy to open up about how the ways in which their organizations work, whether that's in terms of like structures, like pay structures.
Yeah, that's often amazed me actually. People
generosity,
being very open, very generous with the information about, and even at, you know, especially in fact at the beginning during the pandemic, how different organizations were coping and what they were prepared to share. And it shows that although, you know, many of the organizations we work with we've spoken to are kind of in competition with each other, but still very able and willing and open to sharing knowledge and experience, which is great.
No, it's really generous, and I think it's really helpful because I think in industries which are very competitive, and I think like I know, for example, like many architects, for example, will bid for the same thing, or in the end they are companies and are competitive, and same in film, it's highly competitive. Probably most fields are super competitive, but it's really nice to be able to get people being so open because they probably have no idea how impactful that will be for young people, but not just young people, people also wanting to have a foot into that field. Or maybe those who are too shy to approach you as coaches just yet and thinking, how do I kind of build my leadership skills? And then we'll listen to the podcast. I'm 100% sure.
But this is all about us, and I'm still very interested in you. I mean, how do you get you know, the young woman who's a boxer? How do you get people to be vulnerable and open up and talk to you? And I mean, you must have many of the skills that you're saying that we have. I'm quite interested in how you get people from quite often disadvantaged communities as well to open up and talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just spending time. It's spending time, it's being genuine, it's not being, I think there's, especially in documentary, there's many moments where, and that there are big ethical procedures, for example, about not being extractive, like you see also in ethnography and that kind of work, where there is kind of an ethical standard about what you should do, but beyond just the ethical standards that have, you know, now been put in place, there is always going to be a power dynamic, especially, for example, with this girl who is younger than me, from a more disadvantaged background, from a different culture. But it's about just building trust. And I mean, even if that probably took a year and a half, you know, and there's still questions now where she, you know, quite sometimes she said to me recently, oh, but when the film's finished, you're just gonna go, right? You're not gonna come back. So even if there is trust, there's always a sense of, okay, maybe she's building trust with me, but maybe it is just extractive. And it's difficult. And I think it's just an ongoing process of keeping that trust and keeping that relationship in a way that's yeah, as genuine as possible.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good answer, because it does come back to trust. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
I'm thinking we're coming towards our what could be our last question. And I'm thinking, Louise and I, and you, in fact, we're all coming up to our 100th episode shortly. And we've been starting to talk to people on social media at the moment about some of the good examples of leadership that are out there when we're in a world where there are actually quite a lot of bad ones right now. I just wonder whether I'm going to put you right on the spot, so you might want to pause a moment. But what examples are you seeing at the moment of really good leadership out there?
It's difficult because I also really think it's important to have role models. And, you know, when you're a young girl, you kind of have pop stars or something as your role models. But I really think that when you have someone to look up to, it's extremely beneficial to kind of learn also how they act and behave. But today, if I was to think of one, it's sad because I think we're in an age where it's more and more difficult to find those. It's really easy to be kind of influenced by people online.
I just wonder if there's anybody from your world specifically.
Yeah, there's a film director called Laura Poitras. She's fantastic, and she's consistently, I think, someone that I look up to, that I think is able to create not just fantastic films, but is also able to uphold some of those kind of values that I also have. And I guess values is also very
Values
interesting.
is really important.
Yeah, it's a very important way of aligning yourself with who you want to be and who you want to work with. But yeah, I would definitely say her.
Well, let's wrap there. Thanks so much, Pauline. I've really enjoyed the conversation, particularly hearing more about your work, and I'm sure people will be looking up some of what you've talked about, and lots in there from a leadership point of view for our listeners too. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline.
Thank you both so much. It's an honor.